Welcome to Demming Chronicles, where we focus on issues that are trending. We bring you the thoughts and ideas behind those issues. We nudge the conversation in a direction that will help with the development of our country. We present voices of reason and reasonableness. On today's program, we have three wonderful guests. We begin with Dr. Axel Kavatsky.
Hi, Dennise. Thank you for having me.
Our next guest will be Dr. Keron Niles.
Hi, Dennise. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And our third guest will be Erle Noronha, Erle Noronha, who runs a permaculture farm in central Trinidad. We'll be back shortly to bring you Demming Chronicles. Welcome back to Demming Chronicles, and on our set today, Dr. Axel Kravatzky, Chairman and Principal Consultant of Centegra Change Architects Limited. I was fascinated by your name. Tell me, what Change Architects, change and architect going together? Tell me something about your name, Dr. Kravatzky.
Okay. So the Centegra is a combination between synergy and integrity. So our belief is that we work with organizations, and in order for organizations to be able to generate the synergy for which they are created, so you have a number of people coming to work together in an organization, and in order for that to create more than just the sum of its parts, the key ingredient is integrity. And integrity not only in individual ethics, but also in collective ethics and the capability of the organization to be able to fulfill that which it is meant to be doing.
That's excellent. When you talk about integrity, I really feel very, very good, because that's a big issue in terms of corporate governance. Tell me, what is your experience and what is your training? How did you become someone who can train members of the leadership team in terms of governance?
Okay. So my PhD is in development studies together with operations research. So I focus particularly on working with leadership teams, the level 4 and 5 in organizations, which is usually executive and board level, working on complex issues. My case study was in the field of the environment. So I did a lot of environmental economics as well. But the key question there is, how can you get a multidisciplinary team to actually work together and create adaptive solutions to complex situations? Okay, because one of the characteristics of that situation is that any single solution at one point in time will not last. So you have to adapt it all the time as the situation changes. And if you try to optimize for any one situation, that will soon be inappropriate. So the key question that I was dealing with was, how can you work with groups of people to generate adaptive solutions, strategic solutions? So that was about 20 years ago. And since then, I've been working with executive teams mostly. And the key ingredient, the short answer to the ingredient for that is, there are technical elements to it, but the technical elements are actually the easy elements. The more difficult part is the leadership and working together. So I've been focusing on that for 10 years then, working with teams and leaders in that. And then I found that, okay, if you have the intention, you have the skills, you have the capabilities of individuals, how can they work collectively on that? And one of the ingredients in that is the organizations need to be governed well. And so I found that there's a lot of work to be done there, and so that's why I specialized.
And what is the kind of uptake that you have on training with regard to governance?
Okay, well, I used to do training in the public sphere 10 years ago, for like 2 years or so, and it was well received. But then we decided because we are a social business, so Centegra is a social business where we see our impact on society as a core element of why we exist. And so one of the things that we decided to do was to join in and lead the creation of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. So at that point, then we said, look, what we need to create a movement as opposed to individual actors. And to do that, we then say, okay, we'll stop training people publicly as a company. We only work individually with companies, but we create a public institution, a membership institution that is able to create a movement. And so we stopped doing that for 10 years. And now we're starting again because that has its own legs now and is able to function independently. And so we say, okay, good. So let's start training publicly again. And the public training basically is, the big difference now is that we are fully online and everything is in a completely different kind of way, which is a lot better, cheaper, more effective, I find. And yeah, so
the issue of online training, we can save that for another conversation, because keeping people engaged online has significant challenges. But I'm interested in, when you hear the term governance and you think of Trinidad and Tobago, what do you see as some of the hurdles that we need to overcome?
Yeah, so I think there are two basic misconceptions. So first of all, governance applies to all kinds of systems. So I focus on including at the government level. And but okay, so let's start with three things. The first is the word governance. So the word governance has its root in the word of a Greek word that is about steering of a ship. And so it's about direction and it's about steering, it's about responsibility, but it is also with aims as to where are you trying to steer to. So, and then how you do that in different contexts necessarily needs to be different. Politics is different from organizations, so it has similar principles as well. But let's focus on organizations. As we deal with organizations, there are two principal misconceptions. The first is that people generally, I mean, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, because there is so much corruption, they know that being unethical is a major issue, right? So they say, oh, that is very necessary. We're doing so many bad things, okay? But yes, okay, yes, they are. But governance is not really, that is only one part of it. Ethical is an important part. And, but governance is about achieving actual objectives. So it is not about stopping bad things. It's about achieving good things, So the big misconception is that you need governance in order to stop bad things. Yes, you need it for that too. Because if you're trying to do good things and you're actually doing bad things, well, okay, you have a big problem, right? But what I hope people get, what they see the potential is that they come together, they have an idea, and they want to implement this idea, and they need more than themselves. And even for themselves, they need to govern even themselves. But you work together, and if you are trying to work together, it actually really makes sense to be clear about what are you trying to achieve, how do you ensure that you're along the way, you're going in the right direction. And the third element is the part that is frequently missing, and it's equally important as the direction bit and missing, is accountability. Okay, so Lord Cadbury said that Adrian Cadbury in 1992 said that it's frequently sort of quoted, even it's not a whole quotation, but these two words are frequently quoted, that governance is about direction and control of an organization. And direction, clear. Control, maybe overseeing is better than control. But the third part that is missing in that expression is to be accountable. Okay, and that accountable is about being willing to be held to respond to others, to justify one's action, and to face consequences if this action, if your explanation is found to be not good enough. And unless you do these three things, you have a clear direction, you oversee, and you account, your organization will suffer, and this is that good? You want me to, I can, there's one more element which is very important, which is, so governance is about direction, overseeing, and accounting. If you do those three things, then you can expect three big outcomes. Your performance will be better. You will be more responsible in terms of your stewardship of resources, and you will be more ethical in terms of being more consistent with your own values and expectations and your commitments to your stakeholders. Three things. So those are the outcomes of governance. Okay. The other thing now, which is also a big handicap that people unnecessarily put on themselves, and which unfortunately is also strengthened by legislation, is that people frequently think that the purpose of the organization is to make money, or a surplus or something. Yeah, if you're a commercial organization, but that is actually, is not a correct interpretation. And if you focus on that, you will actually do yourself harm. The much better and much truer is that the purpose of the organization is to solve an issue, create a service, create a benefit for somebody somewhere. It could be people, it could be the environment, okay? But it is making a positive difference. And if you focus on that which you're trying to serve, then you will also have greater financial success, okay?
Is that a concept that you find traction in Trinidad and Tobago?
Most successful people, yes. I mean, there are the cowboys who are short-term, corrupt, trying to make a quick buck. Honestly, they don't focus on that. They just focus on how can I get as much money as possible and then cut the losses and everybody else, emigrate to somewhere else and get out. But most people who are successful, or if you look at organizations that are successful, you will find that they're focusing on customers, and then they will have greater financial. However, even more successful, if you want to beat them as well in terms of the level of financial return that they're making, okay, then you will find that they are not even focusing on that, but their actual focus is on the well-being that they are generating through their existence, okay?
And how do you apply that to our public service? This focus on the well-being as the outcome. How does that apply to our public service?
It's like for any organization, it is to say, what is my purpose? How am I? What is my role within society? And how do I? So in a public service, you need to have the business model equivalent in a public institution or in a non-profit institution is to have a theory of change. Okay, you have to think, by doing this, what do I expect and what impact is that supposed to have? Unless you have an idea for how you're going to generate impact, it is hard to actually have an impact. You may just hit and miss. But step number one is to say, why do I exist and what is my purpose? And my purpose is not to do things, but my purpose is to generate an impact on well-being. How do I do that? And then I need to translate that and say, well-being for whom at what costs? Okay, so that is the political act. And unless you have policy, you can't do that. But that is the role of policy, and there's a lot of policy about. So you do that. Then you take that and you say, well, through what actions are we generating that? And then you account for it. So practically, it is quite straightforward. And the more you do that, the more successful. That is what governance is about, is being clear, what are we trying to achieve? Are we doing the achieving? And then accounting to those whom you depend and whom you are serving, that in fact you're doing that. And that you, in the process, you're not generating more damage than you have actually created. And it is not only about paying lip service to say, well, that is what I'm, let's say, for example, we are big proponents of working together for business and all organizations to be working for the Sustainable Development Goals. And we believe that we all have a role to play in that. And it is important, but not sufficient to pay lip service to it. You have to also say, well, what does that practically mean? And how do we measure our components? And how do we really assure ourselves and others that that is what we're doing? And it may seem like a lot, but actually it is very energizing. And particularly for the new generations, for the younger people who have lost all trust, all confidence, all hope in established institutions, they are completely energized by that, as any human being actually is. Is the values give you energy.
Thank you. And on that note, Dr. Kravatzky, Thank you very much. And
You're very welcome.
what I take away from that really is that there is energy in trying to work on the well-being of people and operating with regard to accountability. So you've given me some hope and some joy today. Thank you very much for being part of the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this segment. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Demming Chronicles. Our guest, Dr. Keron Niles. Welcome to the program, Dr. Niles.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Niles is a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and he's also been a part of the Economic and Development Advisory Board. Dr. Niles, Trinidad and Tobago seems to be stuck. How do you see us moving from where we are to where we need to be? That's if you agree that we're stuck.
Okay, well, good afternoon again. So the issue of whether or not we're stuck is really referring to what many people refer to as our implementation deficit, right? And the struggle in terms of getting things done. There are a number of critical factors that lead to that, specifically in our context with our type of government. And so I managed to narrow them down when explaining them out. I managed to narrow them down to about 4 factors that have led us to this point and make implementing anything in Trinidad and Tobago very, very hard. Thankfully, some of it is not unique to Trinidad, and most of it actually is not unique to Trinidad. But should I get straight into those factors?
Because you've identified 4, I like to describe them as hurdles, and I think our population needs to understand what are those hurdles, what are the things that prevent us from thriving in the way that we can. So please share them with us.
Right, so for context, I was a senior manager for the secretariat that advised the board. Our job is actually to write advisory notes to the Prime Minister on the direction that we believe that the country needed to go in. But to get from the point of idea to idea done or implementation is, there's 3 things usually, before you get into the 4 points, there's 3 major levers that you need to consider when you're thinking about why something has been done or has not been done. And those are economic, social, and political cost and benefits, right? So you need to think of all of those 3 things. Usually, there are other considerations like gender and environment, but those aren't always front and center, right? Once you have those 3 things in the back of your mind, those are cross-cutting considerations that you should think about regardless. But in terms of getting the actual policies done, the first reason why things don't move is because, 1, some decisions are simply difficult. And I mean, when I say difficult, I mean they're difficult. They're hard decisions, right? And this is a leadership issue, really. Simply because implementation requires you to say no to good ideas. What do I mean by that? I mean that you cannot do everything. So one of the hallmark books on implementation, I actually took it out of my library because I know I was going to talk to you, is actually called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Very, very, very good book of executing anything. They looked at thousands of projects from across the world on policies, government, private. They said the same thing. If you try to accomplish all of the, like our chairperson used to say, don't try to boil the ocean. If you try to do everything, then you end up doing very, very little. And so unfortunately, governments like our own tend to feel like they need to touch everybody. They need to do everything. They need to be seen to do everything. So if 10 ministries, now we usually have about more than 10 ministries, but if we have 10 ministries and each of them apply for like 500 million to do 10 projects each, the government might actually try to give everybody 500 million, but they don't have that kind of money. So what do? They gave everybody 5 million because they're trying to spread the little resources that they need, that they have across everybody's ministry. But in truth and in fact, if somebody tells you that they need $500 million for something, they actually probably needed $500 million or a little less. You can't give them $5 and expect them to do the same job as it would take $500 million. And that's exactly what we have in Trinidad. If you ask persons that are in charge of projects across the public service, many of them will tell you they don't have the funds. Like, even if the government creates the institution, many of the institutions don't have the resources to actually back that up. The other thing, in addition to saying no, so saying no to good ideas actually means saying, yes, we realize that what you've proposed is important, but we're not doing this right now. And that comes at a major political cost, particularly in a small country like Trinidad, where it takes a level of maturity to accept that. The next thing is, some decisions are simply, and this is still under difficult decisions, by the way, some decisions are unpopular but necessary, such as removing subsidies. So if you live in Trinidad and Tobago, the price of your water, the price of your electricity, just as examples, waste is also included, but let's not go there for today. Water and electricity are subsidized, and they have been for a long time. It's gotten so bad that right now, your children and grandchildren will probably be paying for the electricity and the water that you use now, if you live in Trinidad and Tobago, right? And that's because we borrow heavily to pay for these subsidies, right? Removing these subsidies, however, comes at a political cost, and it's not. No one wants to pay more for water. And it's an unpopular decision, but it's a necessary one. And so that makes the actual implementation of that difficult. And also because you get pushback from other political parties as well and other political quarters. The other thing is necessary but unattractive enforcement. If I had more time, I would have given you stories about this, but I don't have enough time to give you actual stories about how this works. But to give you one example, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have over 771 squatter settlements and over 200,000 squatters. And that's for a population of 1.4 million. That's a lot of persons who are what we call unplanned settlers, right? The typical word is squatters, right? If you want to relocate or remove such persons, people might say, it's not fair for me to be taking my hard-earned money and paying a mortgage every month. Yeah, but those same people will be crying crocodile tears if they wake up in the morning, or if they put on the TV at night when they reach home and they see on the news families being kicked out, sent on the pavement. The government has to think through, if they're going to try to remove somebody, does the government have a responsibility to relocate that family and house that family? Or should the family not have done that in the first place? All right, so all of these things need to be considered, right? But all of those things that I said before, saying no to good ideas, unpopular but necessary decisions, necessary but unattractive enforcement, all of those things I kind of capture under difficult decisions, and it slows down implementation. You try to remove a squatter, and they say, well, we didn't vote for this, and you look bad. And then the politician kind of steps in and says, well, hold on, we don't need to do this, and that literally happens every day.
But Keron, what I'm hearing is a reluctance to enforce, because squatter settlements occur gradually. And if we stop them at the start, then that helps you in terms of the long-term responsibility, doesn't it? So it's early implementation, early enforcement.
So sure, but you also have to make sure you're monitoring. Like if you saw somebody, if I showed you some of these squatter settlements that we have in Trinidad today, you would not believe that they were squatter settlements, right? But you are right. It is when you see it coming at it immediately, right? Which actually doesn't happen because of some monitoring issues that we have, which also ties back into the resourcing issue that I raised about earlier. But let me tell you the other major headings before our time runs out really quickly. The other major heading, of course, is the lack of trust. People don't genuinely believe, and the fact that in the last election, only 58.4% of the population actually voted. A lot of people are apathetic, a lot of people are fed up. So a lot of people don't actually believe the government has their best interest at heart. And that has major implications for implementation as well. On the one side, in Parliament, when you are trying to pass a piece of legislation, because of the lack of trust, even in the Parliament, during the debate, parliamentarians tend to curtail the powers of government, because anything that gives a minister too much power is going to be clamped down on. What that actually means is that when some unforeseen circumstance happens, ministers actually come back and tell you the law doesn't actually cover that. So if you want to do that specific thing that we didn't foresee, you need new legislation, because our legislation is usually very, very narrow, right? The other thing about that is, if you, because there's a general distrust, if there is something that you didn't foresee, right, that you're not going to take the chance, because you know that it will probably risk legislation. I'm sorry, not legislation, I mean litigation, sorry. They will probably sue you if you are not fully covered by the law, because they don't trust you. You understand? Even if you say, listen, we need to move your house to build a major highway that will help people, they don't trust that you have the population's or their best interest at heart. So if you're not fully covered by the letter and spirit of the law, you don't do anything. So you hold up the entire project. Because if it ends up in court, you end up in court for years upon years upon years. I've also seen that. The last thing I would say, because I am pretty sure we're going to be out of time, is the very nature of the policy cycle and bureaucracy in Trinidad and Tobago really slows down implementation. And this is not to take any kind of weight off the shoulders of our leaders who need to lead, right? But the nature of the policy cycle in Trinidad and Tobago is that policy formulation can take some time. I recently worked on the helped advise on the culture policy for Trinidad and Tobago. We went through 27 drafts over 4 years, right? The nature of the policy cycle is a long one. And then the other thing in Trinidad and Tobago is that many matters in the public sector actually get driven to cabinet. So if you think about every project, every proposal, every program has to go to cabinet. And that includes, some of those things include people going on vacation. Literally speaking.
Keron, I'm not sure if you're giving me any hope, and I want to have hope for this country. So tell me, if you had one thing that you could focus on, or you can advise that this is our kind of, there's no silver bullet, but if this could be our primary focus, what would that be?
Well, ironically, it would be like recently when we were doing the work in responding to COVID-19, one of the things that I said was one of the primary focuses have to be learning to focus, as in doing less. Literally speaking, stop trying to do everything and please everybody and trying to spread the money that you do have across all projects. It doesn't make any sense. If you are choosing to focus, choose to focus and do less. You understand? And don't be afraid of unpopular decisions. Some of that, thankfully, that advice is now beginning to be heeded. At least I think so. Maybe a little bit. We're seeing some unpopular decisions being made with regards to what's in the legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. So maybe I can leave you with that. Some hope, some semblance of hope there, where unpopular decisions are being taken, and also in gentle ways, but also there is a need to really focus in terms of asking us, what type of country do we want? And that is really the point of leadership. And that's where the hope lies. Not just in now, but in the next generation. For us to decide as leaders, this is where we want to go as a country, and then go there.
Thank you very much, Keron, and that's brilliant advice. Let's identify what kind of country we want to have, and let's focus narrowly on one thing that will help us get to that. Thank you very much, Keron Niles, Dr. Keron Niles, for your contribution, and we look forward to welcoming you back another time on Demming Chronicles. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. And on this segment, we have an exciting discussion with a farmer. He runs a 20-acre farm in central Trinidad. He uses permaculture as his philosophy for farming. Let's welcome Erle Noronha. Welcome to the program, Erle.
Hi, Dennise, thank you.
And tell us, you run a 20-acre farm. What brings you joy?
Yeah, well, there's three things that bring me joy. One is actually running the farm and all the interactions with all the people involved with it. And part of what excites me is also doing tropical fish. So that's my hobby that created the farm in the first place. The name of the farm is Wasamaki Ecosystems, which means from the fish. And then the last thing that brings me joy really is all my running that I do on the farm and around the farm. I'm a runner, and those things bring me joy.
And do you still do barefoot running?
Yes, for the last 5 years, I've been running barefoot. I used to wear shoes just like everyone else, and I slowly transitioned away from it. And I've actually done 4 marathons now barefoot, and I'm pushing the edge to see how far I can actually run barefoot. Longer than that. I've reached 30 miles.
Wonderful. Let's just talk a little bit about the farm that you're running. You mentioned that it started off because you were farming fish. Tell us about that experience of farming fish in the center of our island.
So my hobby was always fish keeping, and the opportunity came around to buy the farm. I did not know anything about farming, and someone gave me a permaculture book, and that helped us lay out the farm. But the main income from the farm when we first started was doing tropical fish that we were growing and then exporting to Canada as well as selling locally. And the plan initially was to also do food fish like tilapia. And so I studied at Cornell University and I interned in Florida, and I learned all about doing tilapia, but in the long term, it didn't prove to be feasible for the Trinidad market.
Okay. So you had to pivot. So what did
Yes.
you pivot to with 20 acres?
Well, the farm's actually 30 acres. It's 10 acres bigger, which is a lot of space. So we started with the fish. The fish was only a very small area. It's less than a lot of land, really, that you need to do the fish on. But what to do with the other 30 acres? And it used to be a citrus estate, but there was no money in citrus when we bought the place. So we embraced permaculture, which is about designing sustainable sites, and we started planting trees. So now we have a forest of valuable timber trees, but we also got into flowers, so that we do tropical flowers like heliconias and ginger lilies, which we sell to flower shops, and that's really what pays the bills here on the farm.
So the flowers pay the bills. And
Flowers pay the bills.
and what do you eat?
So we grow a lot of our own food now. We grow a lot of provisions. So chania, edos, dashin, tipitambo, yam, all of that is planted extensively in the farm, so that especially during the dry season when everything is ready to harvest, we hardly eat anything else for starches. And then we grow a lot of tropical greens that people are not even aware of, some things that come from all over the world, like ipica, sweet leaf, katuk, poi, things that don't require a lot of herbicides because we don't spray any chemicals on this farm. So we grow that, and then we also grow some of the medicinal plants like ginger and turmeric, things like that. So it's a very diverse farm that we have.
Well, what are you doing to spread this tremendous knowledge that you have?
Well, it's been challenging. We run a website, so anyone that's interested in us can look up our website. It's wasamakipermaculture.org. We run workshops here on the farm, so that almost every month we have something happening on the farm. Now with COVID, everything's kind of shut down. So that's been really challenging for us because a large part of our income also comes from running workshops. So that's how we really get out there. And then, like I did my TEDx talk that you would have known about,
Yes.
and that actually globally gave us some exposure and got me some work outside of Barbados. I mean, outside of Trinidad, some in Barbados, some in the other Caribbean islands. So yeah, it's using the internet really of trying to get the word out, and then just a lot of word of mouth from people that know us and know what we do.
How many people have attended your permaculture education workshops?
Well, we run a 10-day permaculture design course. I just finished teaching my 25th one over the last 12 years. We have between 15 and 20 people that come out to a permaculture design course. So from the design course, we've probably touched about 300 people. And then we run a lot of other workshops, which would probably be another 300 to 500 people over the last 12 years. So it's a very slow movement. It's what's called the quiet revolution out there. But yeah, it's slowly we're getting out there. And as people realize how much of an impact we're having on the environment and what's going wrong, a lot of people are kind of searching for stuff like that we do. And we always get the comment, oh, I didn't know you were in Trinidad, whenever people come here and see what we're doing. They see it all over the world, but they didn't realize it was actually going on here in Trinidad as well.
There's one other thing that I'm aware of your work, and that is you were involved in the rehabilitation of quarries in Barbados. And I wondered, what is the possibility of similar rehabilitation in Trinidad?
It's very possible to take almost any quarry in Trinidad and rehabilitate it. What's really needed is the dedication of either the quarry owner or the people that have the site, and having access to a certain amount of funding, even if it's from the quarry or from other kind of funding, just to kickstart the process. Any quarry in Trinidad, if you follow the principles that we've used, is fixable and can be productive. It's just finding people out there that want to do it and have the resources to push it through.
And as we bring this absolutely inspiring interview to a close, what is your message to Trinidad and Tobago with regard to sustainability of food?
Well, I think everyone should at least try to grow a little bit of food. Like I said before, unless you live in a cave, there is sunlight. And as long as there is sunlight, there is somewhere that you can put a pot and grow a little bit of something in it. And start with things that are easy to grow. Don't start with stuff that's difficult. So we always tell people, start with root crops. Get a piece of turmeric, stick it in a pot, get some dasheen, get some meadows, get a yam, find it up somewhere. And it's exciting when you get your first harvest. And that kind of gives you the momentum now to try something else. So we always say start with something easy. Don't start with something hard.
Thank you very much, Erle. And on that note, find a pot. Once there is sunlight, plant something that you can eat. On that note, we bring to a close this segment of Demming Chronicles. We'll be back shortly. And that brings us to the end of this week's program, Demming Chronicles, where we focused on permaculture as a possibility for how we can change the way we do agriculture. We had a lovely conversation with Dr. Axel Kravatzky talking about what brings energy to an organization as we focus on governance, and Dr. Keron Niles, who gave us some really good tips and some of his experiences with the Economic Advisory Board and how implementation is important. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back another time on Demming Chronicles.